Hey everybody, in this video Jordan Peterson and Douglas Murray explain to Sam Harris why wokeness is a religion. This is part 1 to a 2-part reaction series to this conversation, and it's going to be a barn burner, so I hope you enjoy the video and I hope you stick around for part 2. But without further ado, let's get into it.
The apparent failure, perhaps, of the rationalist atheist types to develop an active ethos that has sufficient beauty and motivational power to serve as a credible replacement for the religious rituals. So there must be a reason why that failure has occurred.
Yeah.
Right? So,
yeah,
so do you have any sense of what the reason might be?
I can give you a short list of reasons. One is...
So for those who are totally lost, basically the idea that Peterson is putting out is that science, secular humanism, that kind of thing, it doesn't inspire you the way that a religion does, for most people anyway. Almost anybody walks into a mighty church and is impressed, not many people into a lab. While that specific analogy or comparison isn't really what Peterson's getting at, it's representative of the broader thing, which is by its very nature, rationalism lacks the kind of artistry that a religion brings with it, because the whole point of rationality is to strip down to just what is. That doesn't mean you can't add stuff on top of it. It just means that rationality by its nature alone can't replace that. So that's what Peterson is saying, but I think Harris is going to have an interesting response.
Is that traditionally the impulse to do that in a religious context has been fatal, right? So to declare your apostasy has been the almost as reliable a way of committing suicide as jumping off a building in most cultures and most societies for the longest time, and still is in many places, as you know, in the Muslim world. So
he's not really answering the question. He's saying, I mean, he might get to it eventually, but he's basically saying you're right, we can't replace it, and that's good. It is a response.
There's been a barrier to entry to thinking creatively about alternatives to religion. And so much of atheism and secularism is just a pitched battle against the eroding power of religion. I mean, when religion really has its power, right, we know what it's like. I mean, again, I think we spoke about this at one point, the moment that it makes this most salient is, Galileo being shown the instruments of torture by men who wouldn't look through his telescope.
This is an overly simplistic reasoning of what happened to Galileo. I have a video up, or it will be up soon. Ben Shapiro destroys. Destroys. Very cliche, very memey. But he debunks this idea live with Harris in a video I'm going to put up soon, or have already put up. What happened to Galileo wasn't really that simplistic. It wasn't really they were afraid of the telescope and afraid of the science. Galileo was doing some other stuff to, mock the church. Now, it doesn't mean you shouldn't torture people, obviously. I'm not saying that what the church was doing in that particular scenario was good. I'm just saying that that's a little bit of a simplistic understanding of what happened. I would even go so far as to say it's a bit reductive. So look into it. Or watch my other video first. Watch my video and then look into it yourself.
Oh, right. I mean, that was the point of contact between untrammeled human rationality and the womb that bore it, right? The religious awe at the beauty of the heavens, right? So the moment a person like Galileo stepped a little too far, and to connect this to astrology again, Galileo was a court astrologer, right? I mean, so there was a point of contact between astronomy and astrology at that point. So we're still under the shadow of that kind of dogmatism and oppression in much of the world. I mean, for the longest time, it's still in the United States, you cannot run for the presidency without pretending to believe in God.
It's the reason for that, by the way, is not because of the supernatural thing. The reason that you have to profess a belief in God in order to run for president and win is because it is a shorthand explanation. Now, maybe it's not particularly accurate in terms of our political class, but in principle, it is a shorthand communication to everyone who is also Christian or something close to it that we share the same fundamental basic values. We share a cultural and value context beyond just our government, and people want to hear that. So yeah, you do have to do that. That's true. It's not because, in my mind, it's not because everybody wants to know whether or not you believe in this supernatural thing. It's because they want to make sure that you're part of the same community as them with the same underlying assumptions. And in this country, that's becoming less and less true. I might do a video about this, actually, is that our values are dividing to such a fundamental level that it makes less and less sense to share a country anymore. We will continue to do so, I'm sure. I'm not a big national divorce guy, but just like if I was setting up the world, it doesn't make sense for people with such different opinions on such important things to share a country. But that's a topic for another day.
It's amazing. It's an amazing fact, right? When will that change? Someday it will. But we have just had almost no time to experiment in this space and innovate in this space.
Well, there's been some decades. And I suppose the thing that unites Jordan and me on this is if we face some of the problems, some of the enemies, you might even say, that you identify as well. And the question is whether you should face them in the midst of an experiment that may or may not work, i.e. a leap into pure rationality, or whether...
I love Douglas Murray. I love Douglas Murray so much. He's been in these videos for a while, but I recently got into him over the last year or so. I like him a lot, and he's absolutely right. This leap into rationalism is an experiment, and for all of religious faults and for all of religious dogmas, Harris didn't really answer the question, which is, okay, Sam, how are you going to replace the artistry and the inspiration and the awe that the religious stories and dogmas provide? Harris says we haven't found a way yet, and also those things have drawbacks. That's not really an answer. So, yeah, I love Murray in general. I'm a Murray fan, and also, yeah, on this point, again, got to answer this question, man.
You might decide it's worth, among other things, taking some of the versions of things that you've had that have been of worth in your past and using them where they're useful.
But what are you picturing there? Because there really is no leap. There's no global leap to pure rationality. There's this incremental erosion of religious answers to terrestrial questions. So there's the moment.
That's true only for the material world. I truly believe that once you hit the wall, the Chinese wall, I guess Great Wall of China is a bad example because it wasn't particularly effective, but Chinese wall is also a legal term for unbreachable barrier. Once you hit that wall of the is-ought problem, where you move from describing what is to describing what should be, I think rationalism fails. I think the proper role, I think rationalism has to fail, and I've given you reasons for that in a lot of other videos. Go watch them, why values aren't facts, all that good stuff. But he's right that it's an erosion of what is, but jumping from the incremental erosion of what is, moving from religion to rationality, that might be an incremental erosion, but the jump to morality is, in my mind, quite the jump. Even if chronologically it's not a sudden global leap, in terms of what you're doing on the metaphysics level, on the theoretical level, it does feel like a bit of a leap.
You have a science of neurology. You begin to look at epilepsy not as demonic possession, but as a neurological problem. Yeah. Before there's a science of neurology, you don't know what the hell's happening. Right, so into that space.
Something obviously drove Douglas, I would say, in some sense, surprisingly, to make the assumption that one of the things that we need to do to defend whatever it is that we have of value in the West, assuming that we have anything of value, was...
Which you should. If you don't assume that we have anything of value in the West, it's because you're an ungrateful fool. I could add context to that, but I'm not. Be grateful, people. Have some humility. Daily reminder.
Something like the reincorporation of this religious substructure. So like, it's not something that I would have expected you to conclude.
But what
so
are you
why
picturing?
did you conclude it?
Well, partly for the reason I just suggested, that the leap into pure rationality, there's no evidence yet that it's going to work, or there's going to be enough, or enough people are going to be able to partake in it.
But give me the precise place where you're worried that it's going to fail, and what are you imagining
Well, you
doing?
think it's failing now.
Yeah, let me give you one example.
Yeah.
And we may be in the midst of the discovery that the only thing worse than religion is its absence.
And
That is a very good phrasing. It reminds me of an idea saying that a democracy is the worst form of government, except for all the other ones. Very reminiscent of that kind of quote. And I really like that. I really like that because it makes the world real and saying that there's no option that's really like great. There's no utopia. There's no solution. No solutions, only trade-offs. That's a great economist, Thomas Sowell. That's a quote from him. I like this phrasing. I like this understanding of reality where it's only trade-offs, where it's only slightly better or worse options. It's a good way of thinking about it.
where are we discovering that?
Look at the religions that people are making up as we speak. I mean, every day there's a new dogma, and you and I and Jordan have repeatedly tripped over those dogmas. Some usually survived, it has to be said, but they're stampeding to create new religion all the time at the moment. Every new heresy that's invented, and they're not as well thought through as past heresies. They don't always have the bloody repercussions yet, but you can easily foresee a situation in which they do. I mean, a new religion is being created as we speak by a new generation of people who think they are non-ideological, who think they're very rational, who think they're past myth, who think they're past story, who think they're better than any of their ancestors and have never bothered to even study their ancestors.
Right.
Yeah, that's an applause line. Again, Douglas Murray, fantastic. So in case you guys don't know what he's talking about is wokeism, horribly defined term. Also might do a video on what it is and more just about the definitional vagary. But most people have an idea of what I'm talking about. And the general point is one that hasn't come up in our videos before, which is maybe pure rationalism isn't really an option. Certainly not on a societal level. Because Peterson would make this argument. You make the psychological argument that people need their heuristics. They need their shorthand for understanding the world, and that is going to naturally turn into dogma. There's no way to get out of a worldview that is religious on a societal level. Individuals like Sam Harris and especially trained people, maybe. But there's an idea here that I think is actually a very good challenge, and Harris is going to respond to it in a second, is that there's no reality in where you escape dogma. There's no reality in which you actually get rid of all faith-based assumptions. There's no reality in where you get rid of religions. You just have religions like Christianity that are kind of less directly political or less directly involved in the material world and are kind of far off and, as Douglas says, more thought through. Or you get the ones that are cropping up now that are bad for all the reasons that he just said. I don't want to butcher what he said because I'm not as smart as Douglas Murray, but that's the idea there. And I think there's a truth to that. I really do think that the idea of an entire society being purely rationalistic, I think, is a very far-fetched idea. But we'll see what Harris has to say. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed that reaction video. If you did, drop a like and please consider subscribing to see more. If you didn't, tell me why. I want to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. I want to have these conversations. If you want to see the rest of my content or explore the broader Pangburn universe that I'm a part of, click one of the buttons that should be floating around my head right about now. And as always, I hope to see you all out there engaging in the war of ideas.